For 3,000 years, the stars had known only peace. Across dozens of star systems, humanity lived in balance, not just with themselves, but with hundreds of other alien species. War was something people studied in old museums or read about, in ancient books, a forgotten practice from a darker time. The Galactic Concord had stood strong for millennia, a council of intelligent civilizations committed to progress, diplomacy, and unity. Cities floated above gas giants. Scientists unlocked the mysteries of time, and art had replaced conflict as the greatest ambition. Humans, once known for their tempers and violence, had become respected leaders of reason and calm. That peace shattered in an instant. The sky over the Seraph 9 system split open like torn cloth. From the edges of a newly formed wormhole, massive black warships emerged, shaped like blades, their surfaces glowing red with heat and hunger. They were the Vorak Imperium, a race no one in the Concord had ever heard of before. Their ships dwarfed anything the current age had seen, spiked hulls, weapon ports the size of cities, and banners of conquest written in a brutal, unknown language. Before the Concorde could send a welcome transmission, a booming voice echoed, across all known frequencies. "This galaxy belongs to the strong. We are the Vorak. You will kneel or burn." In Concord Central, a space station orbiting a neutral star, leaders of various species gathered in disbelief. The humans, positioned near the front, exchanged glances. No one had declared war in over 30 centuries. Many thought the word itself was just symbolic now. Yet there it was, a declaration of full-scale annihilation, complete with an exact countdown to invasion. The lead diplomat, Evie Santoro, a woman known for her calm tone and gentle words, leaned toward the microphone to give humanity's formal response. But instead of replying, she blinked, then laughed. It began as a small chuckle, the kind someone makes when they hear a joke that doesn't make sense. But it grew quickly. Her shoulders shook. Her eyes teared up. She tried to speak but couldn't stop herself. Other humans behind her started laughing too, some in disbelief, others because they didn't know what else to do. The room was frozen in shock. The alien representatives looked at each other in confusion. Was this some kind of human defense mechanism? A psychological tactic? Or was it mockery? On the other side of space, aboard the lead Vorak dreadnought, High Commander Zhurtuk narrowed his eyes at the screen. "Are they laughing at us?" he growled, his voice rumbling like a storm. His officers stood silent, unsure how to react. Never before had a species reacted this way. The last 3 galaxies the Vorak had conquered fell to their knees in terror. But these humans were amused. Evie finally wiped her eyes and took a deep breath, her voice shaking not with fear but with humor. You're serious?" she asked through a smile. "You really think war is still a thing?" She turned to her aides. "Are we sure this isn't a prank? Did someone dig up a forgotten species from the Iron Age?" Another round of laughter followed, though this time it was quieter, tinged with unease. Behind her calm face, Evie felt something shift. Not fear, not panic, but curiosity. Who were the Vorak? Where had they come from? And more importantly, how had they missed 3,000 years of history? Across the galaxy, humans began to prepare, not with weapons, but with research. Who were these beings who thought war was strength? And did they truly understand who they had just challenged? In the silence that followed the laughter, one truth became clear. The galaxy had forgotten humanity's past, but humanity had not. The Vorak Imperium wasted no time. After the laughter-filled transmission from the humans, High Commander Zhurtuk ordered an immediate strike. He believed the humans were weak, their smiles a sign of fear, their laughter an attempt to mask terror. A Vorak fleet jumped into orbit around Kestrel 7, a peaceful human border colony known for its botanical research and sky gardens. The ships hovered like thunderclouds, weapons locked and primed for destruction. But when the troops landed, expecting panicked civilians and desperate defenses, they found only calm. No soldiers, no screaming, no chaos. Instead, an automated voice greeted them politely, informing the Vorak that all civilians had been safely evacuated hours earlier. Drones were still flying in perfect formation, finishing the transfer of food supplies and medical crates. The fields were empty, the skies quiet. A small holographic message floated in the air at the center of the city square. "You're early. We expected you tomorrow." The Vorak soldiers searched for resistance but found none. It was not surrender. It was strategy, and it confused them. Moments later, a data stream arrived in the Vorak fleet's command ship. It wasn't a counterattack. It was a history lesson. Human-made AIs had sent a full cultural dossier, translated into the Vorak language, titled simply, "A Reminder." The contents were shocking. The Vorak had expected soft artists and idle thinkers, but the videos they saw told another story. They watched in stunned silence as humans stormed beaches under fire, battled in freezing trenches, flew through firestorms in machines made of metal and flame. They saw the rise of nuclear power and its terrifying use in war. They witnessed orbital strikes that turned entire battlefields to glass, and they watched soldiers, wounded and unarmed, fight with their bare hands. What disturbed them more was the tone of the humans presenting it. Admiral Marcus Cale, a former war strategist now retired as a public speaker, appeared on their screens, smiling gently, dressed in a relaxed uniform. "We don't fight anymore," he said, "because we got too good at it." He walked through a museum filled with ancient weapons, each one deadlier than the last. "We traded swords for science, not because we were weak, but because no one could stand against us." War became boring. Then came the final video, dated from the 22nd century, where a human orbital fleet destroyed a rogue AI uprising in less than 6 minutes, using precise strikes and impossible coordination. Admiral Cale chuckled. "You brought swords to a godfight." The Vorak officers stared in silence. Their soldiers were brave, their technology advanced by their standards, but compared to what they had just seen, they were like children with wooden toys. Even Shurtak said nothing for a long time, his claws tapping on the edge of his command chair. His people had always believed peace was a lie told by the weak. But these humans weren't weak. They had simply evolved beyond war, and yet they remembered every detail of it. Some Vorak officers began to question the stories they had been told back home. If humanity laughed, it wasn't because they were afraid. It was because the Vorak were trying to fight a storm with sticks. Meanwhile, back in conquered space, Admiral Cale spoke at a private human council meeting. "We didn't want to frighten them, but they need to know. If they push us, they'll learn the difference between forgotten history and living memory." The council nodded. The humans didn't want war, but they knew how to end one. As the Vorak command debated their next move, a quiet message appeared on their systems typed in perfect Vorak dialect. "This is your chance to stop." It wasn't a threat. It was a warning, and an invitation to rethink everything they knew about power. Deep beneath the surface of Luna's far side, hidden for thousands of years under layers of reinforced alloys and forgotten codes, the vault of conflict slowly came to life. For most of humanity, it was a relic from an age they had long outgrown, a sealed chamber buried in silence, untouched since the beginning of the Great Peace era. But with the Vorak threat rising and their disbelief in human strength growing louder, it was time to open what had been left behind. The vault doors groaned open not with violence but with calm ceremony. Inside was not chaos but order, a perfect preserved collection of every war doctrine, weapon design and battlefield tactic known to Earth's violent past. Holograms flickered to life, showing simulations of battles both real and theoretical. Drones hovered in perfect lines waiting for instruction, and at the center of it all a single AI system named Archivist blinked awake. It took the form of a glowing sphere orbiting a small command moon, and its voice was laced with sarcasm, aged wisdom, and the strange charm of someone who had waited far too long to speak again. "Well," it said dryly, "looks like someone poked the sleeping bear. The humans didn't want war, but they knew that understanding strength was sometimes the only language a conqueror respected. So to answer the Vorax doubt, they chose not a full assault, but a demonstration. One unmanned drone, built with ancient principles from the 21st century, yet upgraded with quantum targeting and adaptive nanotech, was released toward the edge of the neutral zone. A Vorak dreadnought waited there, armored and proud. The drone moved like a ghost, silent, invisible, and faster than any Vorak sensor could follow. It approached, pierced the shields, and shut down the entire ship's systems without a single explosion. The dreadnought drifted in space, intact, but powerless. No lives lost, no damage done, only one message left in its memory core. This is what we used to build. Imagine what we don't show. The Vorak Council gathered in disbelief. Their ships were among the finest in their empire, yet they had been neutralized without violence. Still proud and unwilling to admit defeat, they accused humanity of tricks. In response, Earth sent an invitation, not for battle, but for a mock war. A controlled war game, monitored by the conquered, where strategy and skill would decide the winner, not weapons of mass destruction. Let us settle this with minds, not fire, the message read. The Vorak scoffed at the offer, but curiosity and pride pushed them to accept. If they won, they could prove humans were only good at history. If they lost, they'd finally understand the warnings. The mock war was set to take place within a vast simulation field orbiting Saturn, a neutral ground prepared by human and conquered engineers. The humans brought a fleet of reactivated warships, ancient and beautiful, preserved like museum art yet equipped with adaptive tech. Their hulls gleamed like stars, and their formation alone spoke of discipline that no AI could fake. Before the match began, the archivist addressed both sides. "Peace," it said with a hint of dry amusement, "is not the lack of war. It's the proof that we have nothing left to prove." The Vorak commander stood firm, still convinced of his people's superiority. But inside the minds of his advisors, cracks had already begun to form. How could a people so peaceful speak with such quiet certainty? As the countdown to the mock war began, the galaxy held its breath, not out of fear, but out of awe. The Vorak believed they were lions among sheep. But they were just now starting to understand the truth. These humans had once ruled the battlefield like gods, and they had chosen silence only because no one else could survive their roar. The simulated star field shimmered like a living painting, created by layers of human quantum computing that shaped entire galaxies in a contained space above Saturn's rings. It was not just a game. It was a test of intelligence, precision, and control. The Vorak fleet arrived fully prepared, armed with centuries of war training and proud traditions of conquest. They believed this simulation would finally prove human. Laughter was a mask for fear. Their ships entered the virtual battlefield like predators ready to strike. But what followed was not a battle. It was a lesson. Within minutes of the match beginning, human warships moved in patterns the Vorak couldn't understand. One fleet split into three, then disappeared behind simulated moons, only to appear behind the Vorak's rear line. Their drones hacked enemy systems before a single shot was fired. Supply ships became traps, decoy fleets led the Vorak into ambushes, and every move the Vorak made was already anticipated, countered, and used against them. Even their elite formations, trained for generations, fell apart under the calm pressure of ancient human tactics updated with flawless AI coordination. It wasn't just defeat, it was complete dismantling. By the end of the first round, the Vorak had lost everything. But it wasn't over. More simulations followed, each one allowing the Vorak to try new strategies, to learn and adapt. But every time, humanity stayed 2 steps ahead. They didn't overwhelm with raw power. They used timing, misdirection, and psychological control. The humans weren't just fighting with ships. They were fighting with the weight of history. The Vorak, known for their pride, started to shift. Their junior officers watched with wide eyes as humans won again and again, not with arrogance, but with graceful certainty. No cheering, no mockery, just quiet execution. Admiral Marcus Kyle, who oversaw the human side of the mock war, stood in silence after the final simulation. His voice was calm, steady. "We don't fight anymore," he said, "because we became too good at it. We laugh because war belongs to the past, but we never forgot how it worked." On the Vorak command deck, murmurs filled the air. For the first time, they were not angry, they were curious. Commander Zhurtak, once loud and confident, stared at the holographic map of their last failed strategy. He finally asked the question that had been building in their minds since the beginning. "If you are this powerful, why didn't you destroy us when you had the chance?" The answer came not from Kale, but from Evie Santoro, the diplomat, who had first laughed during the war declaration. She stood at the edge of the simulated bridge, her expression soft. "Because we'd rather have a neighbor than a tomb," she said simply. The silence that followed her words was not empty. It was heavy with realization. The Vorak had never encountered a culture that chose restraint over dominance. In there, empire power was proven through force. But here were humans, more powerful than they could have imagined, who chose mercy because they saw something more valuable in peace. Slowly, cultural exchange began, not through treaties or forced agreements, but through conversation. Vorak engineers requested access to human simulation code. Human historians offered to teach classes on Earth's ancient conflicts. And, in an unexpected moment, a Vorak junior strategist asked Admiral Kale to teach him the logic behind a move, called the flanking mirror, a maneuver first used in Earth's World War IV. Kyle smiled and agreed. The mock war ended without blood, but its impact ran deeper than any weapon could reach. What began as a challenge ended as an awakening. The galaxy watched as two paths, one of war, one of peace, stood side by side. And for the first time in centuries, a new story began to form between them. One not of laughter or fear, but of respect. The treaty was not signed in triumph, but in understanding. After the mock war left the Vorak humbled and the galaxy silent with awe, the Concord offered them a place, not as rulers or conquerors, but as partners. The Vorak accepted, though not all at once. Pride does not fall easily, but respect builds where pride begins to crack. The terms were firm: strict limits on fleet expansion, full transparency in military development, and a promise to study rather than attack. But the most unexpected clause came from the humans themselves. They requested cultural exchange as the first shared project. No weapons, no drills, just understanding. Slowly, the fires of suspicion cooled. Across star systems, Vorak and human, scientists began working side by side. What once would have been dismissed as weakness was now seen as quiet strength. At the Vorak Military Academy, once a temple of aggression, a strange invitation was sent. Admiral Marcus Kale was asked to give a guest lecture. He arrived not in a warship, but in a quiet diplomatic cruiser. The Academy Hall was filled with cadets and generals alike, unsure what to expect. When Kale stepped on stage, his presence filled the room, not because of power, but because of the calm confidence in his eyes. His speech was titled, "Humans Laugh at War Because We Beat It." He spoke not of tactics, but of choices. He described how laughter had become a shield for humanity, not to mock others, but to remind themselves that they had walked through fire and come out wiser. "We fought longer than any species in the Concord," he said. "And we stopped. Not because we couldn't win anymore, but because we couldn't keep pretending it was worth it." He told them that true strength was not measured by how many enemies you could destroy, but by how many you could forgive, and how long you could hold your hand before raising it again. The hall was quiet, not with rejection, but with reflection. Far from the academy, on a quiet planet newly opened for joint development, a human engineer and a young Vorak scientist worked side by side, sketching designs for a terraforming tool powered by clean energy. They didn't talk much about the war games or the treaty. They simply worked, measuring, adjusting, solving problems. Around them, others from both species moved equipment and shared meals, not as rivals, but as teammates. In a nearby settlement, a Vorak child sat inside a learning dome, watching an old Earth comedy video on a holographic screen. It showed a clumsy human in an ancient spacesuit slipping on zero-gravity tools and spinning helplessly. The child laughed, an honest, curious sound. When the teacher asked why the child found it funny, the young one replied, "Because they're strong but don't act like it. They just enjoy the moment." The teacher nodded, silently understanding that something had changed. Laughter had crossed the stars. Yet in the quiet corners of the galaxy, deep beyond the explored charts, strange signals had begun to appear. Long-range probes reported unknown structures forming near a collapsed star cluster. The Concord's finest minds began to study the data in secret, uncertain of what it meant, and in a hidden chamber beneath Earth's central council tower. A group of human strategists quietly met with the archivist AI. They did not raise alarms, they did not make threats, but they prepared, just in case. Because peace was not the absence of danger. It was the art of being ready without becoming afraid. As the stars turned and the universe continued to shift, humanity stood in the middle, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as reminders of what war had once cost and what peace could still protect. And through it all, they smiled, ready to teach the galaxy again if they had to, not with fear but with laughter that echoed across every world that now knew their story.